Hi, welcome to another UI update. Remember that one time when I told you that I was redesigning the icons and the Ranger was the first test bed for that, and we were going to go with this really cool, like kind of illustrative, sporty style? Remember when I said that? Yeah, we're not doing that. After we put out that update, some really obvious problems came to light, mainly in terms of readability. So we definitely succeeded in our goal of putting a lot more character and excitement into these little icons, but then when you start to scale them down, they begin to lose a whole lot of meaning. And they're very, very counterintuitive to our goal of helping you see an icon, understand what it does, and how it's useful for that archetype at a glance. This past milestone, I've been really putting a lot of focus and attention on just starting from the ground up and rethinking about these icons and their place in the game and what they're supposed to do. So starting with some of the Ranger visuals as a base, I did a few tests where I took the existing Ranger icons and then just did a different style pass on them just as a comparison between the two. And it's a night and day difference. Even when we retained the silhouette, just flattening out the color and the rendering makes it incredibly readable at a small scale. So fast forward, after kind of sending some of these icons around, I collaborated with Blair and Melissa on kind of the methodology and the language for the icons moving forward. You can see here, this is my working file, so there are lots and lots and lots and lots of icons. But for each archetype, I got with Blair, and I got a rundown of basically the gist of every power and how it's useful for that particular archetype. And so I started creating symbols around things like, oh, this is for resource pool gain, or this is to put a damage over time debuff on an enemy. And you start to think of like, okay, that power is useful in a specific context or a specific situation. And as a player, a new player or an old player, you're going to want to know, looking down at your tray really quickly, if that situation comes up, you're going to want to know which power to use. The next step was to create a language around them. So you can see all these are all kind of set on a neutral palette. So this is a pretty radical shift from what we've seen in the game so far. I was able to move forward and create a color language and shape language around the framing for the icon. We're looking at some pretty basic shapes here, and when we design icons, beyond just conveying the meaning of the power, we also have to think about the end user and their particular limitations. And so we have had many discussions about people who are visually impaired and have degrees of color blindness, and we're starting to rely a lot more on shape than color. Color does have a place in the icon design, but we started off with shape first. So we have a number of shapes that create the framing around the power icons, and each one of those shapes actually has a very deliberate meaning, so that at a glance, regardless of color, and actually regardless of the actual white action icon inside of the frame, you can look at the frame and get essentially the most important thing you need to know about that. Whether it's an attack, whether it's a buff, whether it's a passive ability, or something that can actually transform you into a different form, or give you new capabilities that aren't necessarily like an aggressive power against another player. And the final result, as you can see here on the champion power tray, is a layout that actually starts to have some interest. You know, before we had these little paintings, and while they were very interesting to look at, you didn't get a sense of the hierarchy, or you didn't necessarily get a sense of the use cases for each ability. So just at a glance, you can tell, okay, these couple powers over here are aggressive powers over another player. But also at a quick glance, you can tell with this third ability, oh, that's a triangle down. That's because as a secondary effect of that attack, it puts a bleed or a debuff on the other player. And then that turns into a combo chain as well, which before, it was very easy to look at all of our icons and kind of read them as they're all attacks, but that's not always the case. You might start off with an attack and a combo, but then it turns into a chain which can continue the damaging capabilities, or you can go the other way and apply certain buffs and debuffs on yourself, other players, and teammates. So the most aggressive characters are going to have like a lot of purples and reds. When you have a more support role, you're going to see a lot more green and a lot more light colors. So on the Legionnaire, we get a little green. When we go to the Druid, we get a lot of green and a lot of teal. And teal is kind of our positive buff color. So there's certain colors in the language that we've created that override other colors. So like if you do an ability that has an effect over multiple targets, friend or foe, that gets an orange. And so, I mean, of course, all this is subject to change as we go. But now that we have it in game and we can see how effective it is at conveying some of the functionality of each power, we feel really strong about this direction. I'm really excited about the direction that we're taking things. Hopefully you are too, and hopefully when you play the game and you see them, you approach each archetype now with a new understanding. So have fun, and we'll see you in game.